Food security is a major component of world existence, and according to the World Food Organization, that is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, food security encompasses 4 main areas. That is food availability, food access, food safety, and food affordability. My name is Andrew Abonyo, and I'm a co-founder of the Food Security for Peace and Nutrition Africa, a non-governmental organization that deals with food security in the African region. Now, today we are going to have a focus on the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the food systems across the world and across Africa, and especially across the East African region, with a focus on Kenya. And my main focus areas today will be the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the food chain systems of different crops, and how best we can help our farmers and the key players in the sector to recover from this pandemic or the effects of this pandemic, and a resilience strategy such that in the wake of another pandemic in future, how best can we be resilient to such pandemics. Now, there are a lot of lessons learned from the pandemic across the world, and as the pandemic surged on, the economies of different across the world were adversely affected, and major economies were brought down, and the agricultural sector was not an exception in this case, with so many farmers having their produce in the farms, not going to the markets due to the restrictions that were put in place to curb the coronavirus pandemic, including ban to flights, international and local flights, closure of markets, among many other strategies to curb this coronavirus pandemic. Now, just for a case, in India, there was an increase in unemployment. Of course, before that time, there was unemployment in India at around 8.3%, but in the start, or at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the level of unemployment increased from 8.3% to around 30% in the urban areas, and around 24% in the rural areas. So this was brought about by the different restrictions and travel restrictions from particular areas in India, whereby you find that some of the people that were employed in the urban areas sought to move from the urban areas to the rural areas, rendering most of the agricultural activities and the companies within the urban areas laborless, and that brought down the performance of those industries. In Kenya, for example, the flower sector, or the agricultural sector, is one of the greatest contributor to the GDP of the country, and it contributes around a total of 70% of the economy of Kenya, and 1% of the total external income to the country. So in 2019, Kenya received or made a revenue of around 144 billion Kenya shillings, and around 72% of this amount was contributed by the flower sector, that is the fresh cut flower sector, and that one was contributing around 104 million Kenya shillings, that is 72% of the whole amount. 27% went to the vegetables, and around 13% went to the fruits sector. And the major export destination for these products is the European market. And we realized that the greater percentage of this effect, pandemic, was felt in the European countries and other parts of the world compared to the African countries. Now, how best can we help to resuscitate the farmers and the different people who play, or the different players or actors in this sector? There are a lot of strategies that were employed by governments in different parts of the world, including offering funds to help the farmers or to resuscitate the economy by providing a background or a backup for the different players of the economy, including small and micro businesses in different parts of the world. And the Food and Agriculture Organization also pumped in funds to help the different people in different parts of the world to come up or to have a resilience against this coronavirus pandemic. Of course, there were loss of jobs, there were closure of businesses, closure of markets, closure of different activities, a change in the culture in which people, in the normal trends that people had before. Burials had a different outlook, weddings had a different outlook, and the flower sector was greatly affected because most of these events, locally and internationally, were the major consumers of these products. Now, there are a lot of strategies that can be employed by different governments, different organizations, and even individuals to curb the effects of this pandemic. And the main thing in relation to agriculture, there should be a strengthened system of approach in the agricultural production system, whereby we can have something like a circular economy where all the resources that are used at a particular point help to sustain the agricultural system. Now, taking a look at the kind of migration that happened during the start of the coronavirus pandemic, where people lost jobs and they left the urban and shifted to the rural areas. Some of them changed their careers from whatever they were doing before because of loss of jobs, and they started settling in the rural areas with a lot of focus on agricultural production. And this was the flip side of the pandemic because more food was produced in the rural areas. But then, due to the economic impact of this, of the pandemic, there was a lower purchasing power. So there was a lot of food produced, but a lower purchasing power in different parts of the country, or even different parts of the world. So, for example, in one of my travels around the country, on my duty, we visited one farmer, and he had a lot of produce. He's a tomato producer. He had a lot of produce in the farm. But he indicated one challenge, that there was no market for their produce. Yes, the production was there, but most of the farmers in the region had produced the same tomatoes that he was doing. So the markets were flooded, and the returns were way too low compared to the normal times. So there's a need and there's an urge to strengthen the agricultural production system such that there is no wastage even during the normal times, and there is a strategy of balancing the productions or the produces from wherever they come from to the destination markets. So another strategy that can be employed is to keep the supply chain functional. And talking of that, we've mentioned before that one of the major areas of the major focuses security is food accessibility, and maintaining the supply chain helps the food or the food produced from one point reaching another point, or the point of production to the point of sale. So just a case example, in Bengal, India, in the year 1943, 1 to 3 million lives were lost due to food starvation. And it was not because of lack of food, but it was because of the accessibility point, or the accessibility part of the food. And there was a lot of produce in the rural areas, and the food was not reaching the purchasing points because of the restrictions that were placed to curb the pandemic that was at that time in India. So food accessibility, there's an urge and a need to strengthen the supply chain so that the food produced at one point reaches the purchase destination in time and efficiently. So another thing that can help the farmers or the farming community to rise up from this pandemic, the farmers should be protected, or the farming population should be protected from the pandemic itself, or from the coronavirus itself, because they form the larger part of the stakeholders in this in the production system, the agricultural production system, and there is a need to protect the farmers. They should be kept safe, they should be kept healthy, so that they also produce, they keep on producing for the other populations that are not in the farms. Another strategy that can be employed majorly by the government, there should be a continued access to the markets. We know that during the pandemic, markets were shut down. Different places, eateries, hotels, different places were shut down. And this had a great effect on the farmers, because most of their customers were these restaurants, were these hotels, were the schools that were shut down, and the government institutions that were shut down formed a major part of their market share. So there should be a continued access, strategic access to the market, with measures put in place by the government, so that the farmers should not feel that great impact of the coronavirus as a recovery strategy is being worked out. There should be also assistance packages from the government, including funds to the farmers. They should also be provided with resources and incentives, fertilizers, and so many other things, including funds to purchase the seeds, and even seeds, so that the production system can be sustained. With all these effects, there's a great need also to ensure that in the future, in case another pandemic occurs of this nature or any other nature, there should be a resilience strategy, so that the effects of the pandemics should not get the farmers unawares, should not get anyone unawares. And from the lessons learned from this pandemic, there's a lot that we can do, so that in the wake of another pandemic, all the things are kept constant, and there's no pressure on the economy as occasioned in this case. One of the clearest strategies that is needed by any government across the world is a constant search, monitoring, and evaluation of the agricultural system, with production of new strategies, new species of animals, new varieties of crops, to help the farmers even during kinds of pandemic, so that the production of these foods can continue throughout, and from the production point to their point of consumption, the system is maintained constantly. So there is need for accurate and consistent data about the productions of different parts of the region, different parts of the world, so that the agricultural system is maintained constantly. Another resilience strategy that governments can employ is avoiding the export bans from their countries, because most of the farmers depend solely on this, and when there's such kind of export bans, there's a great effect felt by the farmers, and there's great loss to the countries in particular, because their final destinations, or their final the final destination of their goods is already hindered because of the bans. So another strategy that can be employed effectively is using the social safety nets, that is the social security of the farmers. Funds should be consistently provided to the insurance companies that are geared towards protecting the farmers in cases of such, so that when the pandemic set in, the farmers are not worried with the projections of the effects of the pandemic, because they'll have a backup that can help them sustain the production throughout the pandemic. There's also need for a financial and food reserve for recovery of such pandemics, and such funds should also be efficient, because the farmers need a lot of funds, and most of the production requires a lot of funds, even from the production point, transportation to the different markets, gaining permits to access the markets. All these processes require funds, and if there are funds that are directed to such occasions, it will be easier for the farmers to have a resilience or a buffer against such kinds of pandemics. So we have also noted a lot of job losses across the world due to the pandemic, and there's need for different people in different sectors of the economy to have multiple skills, so that in such a scenario, if someone loses a job at one particular point, he can set back and get to another skill that he had before, and such skills can help even the farmers to continue gaining some income even during such kinds of pandemic. And the government should advance this by providing funds for such skill development, so that most of the people, including the youth, the women, the old people in the agricultural sector, all these people should have such skills, so that in the wake of such kinds of pandemic, they can have a resilience against the effect of such pandemic. It's also been noted that most of the youth are not pro-agriculture, especially in the rural areas, and we realize that they form a larger base, or the larger population base in many parts of the world, and they can be used as a resilience backup, because if the youths are engaged in agricultural production, because of the energy that they have in them, the food production system can be enhanced with new strategies, with new ideas, with new technologies that can help in production of more of the produce, and also marketing the produce to the consumers. It has also been noted that the e-commerce sector has also received a great boost during this pandemic, because most consumers prefer home deliveries for their produce. So the e-commerce sector has really come up during this time, because most of the people prefer little or no contact with other people, even the suppliers of the produce and the farmers themselves. There's also need to protect the farmers in the rural areas, as we have mentioned before, from different kinds of diseases, coronavirus being one of them. But the farmers should be healthy in their state as they continue producing, so that the system of production is maintained and enhanced effectively. So I hope, it is my hope, that even as we plunge into the recovery strategies of different economies across the world, across Africa, and even in our country, Kenya, there is need, and there's a great hope that we're going to recover from this, the effects of this pandemic, however long it will take, however short it will take. But there's great hope in the people that we shall overcome this pandemic and its effects, especially in the agricultural sector, with all the players coming into play, or the different stakeholders coming into play, including the governments, agricultural institutions, individuals, and even farmers themselves. They can help to buffer the economy, the different struggling economies across the world, such that in the shortest time possible, we'll get out of the effects of this pandemic. Thank you very much.